Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly through the misty streets of Edo-era Japan, where sandals scuff over stone, the air smells faintly of soy and wood smoke, and 1,000 lives are tucked into wooden lunchboxes. You've just rolled your mat, tucked your ink brush into your sash, and reached for something far more essential than poetry or philosophy, your bento. It's warm, it's precisely packed. And yes, it's mostly rice, but not just any rice. You gently lift the lid and find the surface gleaming grains perfectly aligned, the faint scent of vinegar and salt teasing your nose. Edo rice wasn't some throwaway carb filler. It was social glue, culinary anchor, and economic lifeblood, all in one. You probably won't survive this era's food safety laws, but hey, at least your lunch will be photogenic. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your city and what time you're tuning in from. I always love seeing where and when you're listening. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across a small footbridge, past fishermen folding their nets, and housewives brushing soot from their doorways, and your stomach already knows what it's craving. Rice, it's the first thing packed into your box and always the most important. Steamed in iron kettles over charcoal, seasoned with vinegar or sesame seeds, and then, depending on your mood or your mother, shaped into balls, cubes, or whimsical triangles. Some even have salted salmon tucked inside, like a little edible hug. Rice in Edo era. Japan isn't just food, it's a form of currency. Your wages as a low-ranking official might literally be paid in sacks of rice. And while historians still argue whether this was more symbolic than practical, one thing's clear: rice shaped your social standing and your menu. You crouch under the paper awning of a modest eatery and watch as a bento craftsman flattens each clump of rice with practiced fingers like he's arranging scrolls in a shrine. No grains out of place, no overcooked mush. Edo pride rests in each bite. A soggy rice ball would have been an insult to your ancestors, and probably your future spouse too. Beneath the rice, sometimes a sliver of pickled plum, bright red like a drop of ink on parchment. The umeboshi isn't just for flavor, it's antimicrobial. Yes, your lunchbox came with built-in food safety before that was even a word, and it helps your rice survive the humid Tokyo summers without turning into something that growls. You find a quiet step near a willow tree, unwrap the cloth binding your box, and inhale. A soft warmth rises from the rice. It smells clean, just slightly sweet. You pluck one triangle with your fingers, tear it in half, and find it still steaming inside. Your friend beside you munches his too fast and burns his mouth. Amateur. A swallow of tea cools your throat. No plastic bottles here, just a clay jug wrapped in twine, sweating slightly in the summer sun. It's cold, a little bitter, and it completes the rice like the moon completes a haiku. Bento design itself is guided by the rice. Every box, whether carved from cypress or pieced together from bamboo, has a place of honor for it. Some boxes are single-tiered, perfect for students or messengers on the go. others are grand two-tiered affairs, where the top layer is nothing but rice, and the bottom is whatever your heart or cook felt like that morning. Fried tofu, maybe. Pickled radish. Egg crepe rolled like a tiny scroll. You overhear a wealthy merchant inspecting his lunch with an expression of theatrical importance. His rice has gold flakes. Actual flakes. You blink, he smirks. You mentally note that if your rice has gold in it, you've officially entered a lunch duel. There's a hierarchy to even the simplest ingredients. The white rice you're eating has been polished by hand grain by grain by women who sit for hours at grinding wheels. Their hands blister, their arms sore, they still hum while they work. Rice of this quality isn't cheap. But for a midday meal to be respectable, the rice must be pristine. Anything less would be shameful. You finish your box slowly. Each bite is soft, but not mushy, tender, but not weak. The vinegar gives it a quiet tang, almost floral. And that last bite with the tiny hidden plum, salty, sour, bold, wakes you up just enough to realize how beautifully quiet everything is. Some lunchboxes had compartments for two rice types, plain white and sekihan sticky rice, steamed with red beans, eaten during festivals or special announcements. Your uncle once packed only sekihan for an entire week after his son passed his government exam. Even the lunchbox knew how to brag. Of course, the rice had rules. You couldn't just plop it in, stir it around and call it a day. No. The rice must be shaped, literally. If it's onigiri, it's triangular. If it's molded into fans or flower petals, you better be sending a message, "My mother loves me," or "I stayed up late and this lunch is a peace offering." A quiet old man near you has a rice ball shaped like a chrysanthemum. You glance, he sees you, nods. No words are needed. His wife probably shaped it. She's gone now. He still packs it that way. The silence is heavier than his lunchbox. And so the rice ends as it began. Centerpiece, message bearer, mood setter. A lunch without rice is like a haiku missing its final line, technically edible, but somehow incomplete. You're barely done licking the last grain of rice from your fingers when your eye wanders to something equally important, how that rice was packed. Not just the food itself, but the vessel. Because in Edo era Japan, the lunchbox wasn't some disposable plastic cube or wrinkled brown bag. It was a statement, a carved, lacquered, carefully curated extension of your personality income bracket, and maybe even your romantic eligibility. You shift on the stone step and glance at the lunchbox beside you. It's stacked. Two-tiered. The outside is a polished reddish-brown lacquer, the kind that glistens in sunlight and screams, "My family is doing just fine, thank you." Small golden cranes dance around the corners, delicately painted by someone with better eyesight and steadier hands than you'll ever have. A merchant's son sits nearby untying his silk cloth with practiced elegance. His box makes a soft wooden click as it opens. Inside not one, not two, but 4 compartments. You squint. One holds rice, of course. The other's grilled mackerel with citrus, a folded egg like golden origami, and pickled lotus root carved into flower shapes. Is it lunch or performance art? Historians still argue whether these displays were more about nourishment or social signaling, but the answer seems pretty clear when you're the one holding a single-tier bamboo tube with only umeboshi and dreams inside. Lunchboxes weren't all show, though. Their construction was a kind of silent engineering marvel. Some were bento bako square wooden boxes, stackable and bound with cords. Others were major wappa, made from thin strips of bent cedar wood, held together without nails, their soft curves fitting snugly against your hip when carried. These didn't just store food, they whispered about craftsmanship tradition and the patience of someone who spent 3 days shaping a lunch container just so your pickled radish wouldn't roll into your sweet omelet. You run your fingers over your own box. It's older. The lacquer has chipped in places, but you remember when your mother first packed it for you. She tied it with a simple cotton furoshiki, patterned with tiny plum blossoms. You still use that cloth today. It's a little frayed and smells faintly of sesame oil, ink, and sunlight. Objects age gracefully when they're loved. Not everyone had boxes, of course. The lower classes, farmers, messengers, dockhands, often wrapped their meals in palm leaves or thin bamboo husks, then secured them with twine. These were biodegradable, fragrant, and surprisingly effective at keeping things fresh. Plus, you could toss them over your shoulder without fear of breaking a family heirloom. Some craftsmen even embedded secret compartments in lunchboxes. Yes, tiny drawers hidden beneath the rice, meant for sauces, pickled vegetables, or a surprise sweet bean treat. Children loved these. So did spies. You're not kidding. There are at least 2 recorded incidents where coded messages were smuggled between provinces using nothing more than seaweed sheets and a hollow rice divider. That's dedication to espionage and lunch. You notice a teacher nearby unpacking his meal. His box is a simple 2-tone wood with one lacquered edge carefully oiled and polished. He pulls out a napkin, not paper, but woven cotton, folds it across his lap, and begins his meal in total silence. There's a ceremony to it. No rush, no idle chatter, just chopsticks, small bites, and closed eyes. The box might as well be a shrine. In the wealthier households, lunch boxes were expressions of luxury. Some came with metal linings to keep warm dishes insulated. Others had spring-loaded trays. Yes, mechanical compartments invented by over-ambitious craftsmen with too much free time. You wouldn't be surprised to open one and find a live orchestra inside. Almost. And the decoration. Oh, the decoration. Some lids were painted with seasonal motifs. Fall leaves, spring blossoms, winter cranes. Others featured family crests or poetic verses from well-known haiku masters. There's a story of one box inscribed with a love poem so potent that a young woman fainted upon reading it. That may be an exaggeration, but still you don't get that kind of drama from Tupperware. Children's lunchboxes were sometimes carved into animal shapes. Foxes, turtles, rabbits. One particularly creative mother even fashioned a box shaped like a carp, so that when her son unwrapped it at school, the other kids gasped. He probably peaked in 3rd grade. You think about the box you saw yesterday in the market, a newly made piece with a rosewood lid, brass hinges, and a tiny carved turtle resting on the handle. It cost more than a month's rent. You sighed, nodded at the vendor, and walked away. But you think about it often. Maybe one day. These boxes weren't just containers, they were inheritances, passed from father to son, mother to daughter, cleaned meticulously, stored in silk-lined drawers, not for daily use necessarily, but brought out during special days, outings, festivals, first jobs, first heartbreaks. And despite their beauty, they were also built to last. Bento boxes were sanded, varnished, oiled, and even after years, refused to splinter or absorb the scent of fish. You might forget the meal inside, but you'd remember the way the box clicked shut, that soft, hollow sound like a secret being kept. So you finish your meal, you wipe your hands on the same cloth you untied earlier. You refit the lid gently, press it down until you hear that soft, familiar snap. It's not just lunch ending. It's a small ritual, a full stop. The merchant boy has already left. His box is packed, retied, and back under his arm. But you notice he left a sliver of egg behind, maybe by accident, maybe on purpose. A tiny golden offering to the gods of food and form. And you tuck your lunchbox away, feeling oddly grateful, not just for the rice, but for the box that held it. The way it cradled your hunger. The way it said without words that someone cared enough to pack a little beauty into your day. You stretch your legs a little and glance around the courtyard. The midday sun is warm, but not harsh, filtering through bamboo leaves in soft dapples. Somewhere nearby, a bell chimes from a distant shop. Your nose twitches. Not from incense, not from grilled fish. No, this scent is sharper, more acidic, tangy, fermented. A little rude if you're honest. You're about to meet the third essential chapter of the Edo-era bento experience. Pickled everything. You shift the lid of your lunchbox slightly, revealing a hidden corner where something glows yellow and green. It's tsukemono pickled vegetables. They're not just garnish, they're punctuation marks. A palate cleanser, a preservative, and occasionally a social flex. You pick up a slice with your chopsticks. It crunches, loudly, satisfyingly. The flavor hits like a polite slap vinegar salt umami. You blink, you nod, you go in for a second. Historians still argue whether pickled daikon was more common among samurai or merchants. But one thing's for sure, everyone ate it. Whether you were pulling carts through muddy streets or composing poems for a living, you knew the comfort of something pickled. Daikon radish was the king of Edo pickles. Sliced, sun-dried, then soaked in rice, bran and salt for days or weeks, if the weather allowed. Its strong aroma could startle a cat, but the flavor addictive. It complemented rice perfectly. The crunch offered contrast to the softness. It kept well-survived journeys and didn't care if your lunchbox was jostled by a bumpy ride on a palanquin. But daikon was only the beginning. You might find cucumbers, eggplant, even ginger, all pickled in miso sake lees, soy sauce, or plain vinegar. Some pickles were so sour they made you sneeze. Others were sweet, almost dessert-like. And if you were lucky, you'd get a combination, a little bitter plum here, a bright yellow takuan. There may be a sliver of pink shiso leaf to tie it all together, like a culinary haiku. In the bustling streets of Nihonbashi, whole shops specialized in tsukemono. You could walk in with a single copper coin and walk out with enough pickled radish to last 3 lunches, assuming you didn't snack on it during the walk home, which, let's face it, you did. Children often had a favorite pickle. Some preferred crisp cucumbers with sesame seeds. Others adored konbu pickled kelp that smelled like the sea and chewed like licorice. There's even a story of a 6-year-old who cried for an hour after dropping his last shibazuki on the temple steps. The monk gave him a roasted chestnut to console him. It wasn't the same. Pickles weren't just snacks, they were symbolic. Certain types were believed to ward off illness. Umeboshi, the wrinkled, deeply sour pickled plum, was practically medicinal. It traveled in soldiers' packs. It rested at the center of rice balls, like a red eye. It was known to clean the blood, strengthen the heart, and according to one 17th century poem, saved the soul of a tired man. In summer months, pickled vegetables also served a vital purpose. They made you thirsty, which in turn encouraged you to drink more tea. Green tea, barley tea, roasted rice tea. All cleansing, all hydrating, all subtle aids to digestion. One bite of pickled burdock root, and suddenly that third cup of tea doesn't seem excessive. It seems enlightened. And the aesthetic of pickles never an afterthought. Carved, twisted, and shaped into flowers, leaves, and waves, they added color and contrast to otherwise pale rice or neutral proteins. A proper lunchbox wasn't just about flavor, it had to look like a miniature garden, each element carefully arranged, visually balanced. If your pickles clashed with your rice ball, what were you even doing with your life? There was an old superstition that giving someone your last pickle slice meant you were in love with them. Which sounds sweet until you remember that pickles were usually the only thing left after everything else was eaten. Here have this lonely piece of sour radish. I didn't finish isn't exactly poetry, but it got the message across. Pickling was also a form of domestic ritual. Many Edo households had a large ceramic crock buried halfway in the kitchen floor, filled with rice bran salt and old pickling water. Every morning, the women of the house stirred it with bare hands, adding scraps of vegetable, removing old ones, keeping the microbial life inside balanced and thriving. It was part kitchen task, part witchcraft. Your mother did it. Her mother did it. You, however, are more likely to just buy a jar. And yes, there were pickle scandals. One famous case involved a local shop accused of adding ash to their pickling brine to stretch out fermentation time. The result, pickles that smelled oddly like a wood-burning stove and sparked a minor neighborhood boycott. No one was hurt, but the lesson was clear: don't mess with tsukemono. As you savor the last of your pickled eggplant, something dawns on you. This small strip of vegetable brined for a week, colored by plum vinegar carved into a maple leaf, is doing more than just tasting good. It's reminding you of the season, of the person who made it, of the fact that even sour things can belong in beautiful moments. You pack your box away slowly. Your chopsticks are stained slightly pink. Your fingers smell faintly of vinegar and cedar. You're full but not sleepy. Calm but not sluggish. A good lunch. A thoughtful one. And somewhere behind you, a child bites into a pickled radish and winces in delight. You smile, the pickle wins again. You're back on your feet, meandering past a row of samurai houses where the walls are high and the entrances modest. The gravel crunches beneath your sandals, and you instinctively lower your voice. Not because you're about to do something illegal, but because these are samurai homes and there's a certain kind of silence you respect here. Silence like a blade's edge. Stillness like a paused breath. But even samurai had to eat lunch, and surprisingly they were a lot more particular about it than you'd think. You glance at a young retainer sitting by the gate, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. In his lap, a modest wooden bento box. You nod to him. He doesn't nod back, but that's fine. His lunch speaks for him. The bento of a samurai wasn't opulent. It was efficient, balanced, and utterly tactical. Everything packed tight, no leaks, no mess, no odors to give away your position. You might find a wedge of grilled fish, nothing oily or flashy, just lightly salted and pressed flat to avoid any unexpected crunch. Next to it, thin sliced burdock root, sautéed in soy and mirin. Beneath it all, rice. Always rice. Sometimes even pressed into small uniform cubes, easy to count, easy to eat, and easy to share if duty required it. Historians still argue whether higher-ranking samurai ate differently from their subordinates during field duty. Some records suggest that elite samurai received warm meals in porcelain containers during long campaigns. Others claim that every warrior, regardless of rank, ate the same humble rations. What's not debated samurai were some of the earliest adopters of what we'd now call meal prep. And why not? A cleanly packed meal was like a cleanly drawn sword, a reflection of one's discipline. Bento making among samurai families often became a silent competition. Wives would wake early, very early, to pack a husband's lunch with just the right balance of nutrition and aesthetics. Not showy, not romantic, but filled with coded care. There's a preserved record of one samurai whose wife packed a single pickled plum at the center of his rice every morning. For 10 years he thought it was for flavor. Only later did he learn that it symbolized her prayer for his safe return. Each time a miniature rising sun. She passed before she could explain it to him, but he never ate another lunch without placing a plum in the middle. The shape of the lunchbox also mattered. Rounded corners made it easier to strap to one's hip or tuck into the folds of a garment. Some had a slightly convex lid to prevent splashes during movement. And for those in patrol units, there were even flat, foldable bento cases crafted from interlocked slats that collapsed when empty. You'd eat, rinse, fold, and move on. You step aside as a patrol unit passes, the sound of their gita clacking against the stone sinks like a slow drum beat. One of them, maybe the youngest, has his box tied with a bright blue sash. His mother's handiwork, probably. Another carries his tucked beneath his arm, unassuming, like it holds documents. But you know, it's rice and dried sardines in there. Maybe a strip of sweet egg. Warriors need sugar too, after all. There were certain unspoken rules in a samurai's lunch. No raw fish, it spoiled too easily. No stews too messy. No garlic too strong. Anything that lingered on the breath or fingers was considered a potential breach of decorum. Lunch was meant to refresh, not distract. And yet even with all this restraint, there was beauty. The samurai lunch wasn't plain, it was deliberate. A few slices of lotus root, each one resembling a wheel, a cut of carrot carved into a maple leaf, a tamagoyaki, a rolled omelet cut so neatly you'd think it was folded with tweezers. Everything served a purpose. Nothing was random. You remember a scroll you once saw in a tea house, a painting of a single bento box, resting beside a katana. Below it a poem, steel for battle rice, for peace. Both must be carried with care. It's not hard to imagine a young samurai stationed at a lonely gate, drawing comfort from the familiar taste of home. He lifts the lid. He sees his mother's careful folds, his sister's carved pickles, maybe even a pressed flower tucked into the cloth. For a moment before drawing steel or taking orders, he remembers who he is. Even during peacetime, samurai carried bentos on hunting trips, patrols, and long walks to provincial offices. One diary mentions a duck-watching expedition that featured a particularly memorable lunch of sesame fried tofu and pickled chrysanthemum leaves. Yes, that's a thing. And yes, it was apparently delicious. Then there's the practical brilliance of the samurai skewer. A few seasoned bits of wild yam strung on a small bamboo stick, easy to eat one-handed while keeping the other on your sword. Fast food, Edo style. You lean back against a wooden post and sigh. There's something oddly comforting about the idea that even the most disciplined warriors, men trained to fight and die for honor, had someone thinking about their lunch. Someone waking up early, boiling water, shaping rice, tucking a cloth just so. That silent care might never be spoken, but it's eaten and remembered. You follow the narrow path down toward the riverfront, where the scent of water lilies and warm mud replaces the sharper city smells. The clatter of sandals is softer here, drowned by the splash of oars and the echo of merchants calling from their boats. Edo was a city built on water, its lifeblood a network of canals and rivers. And while samurai might have their lunch packed like a strategy map, boatmen had their own method, sleek, waterproof, and float ready. You pause by the edge, watching a broad-shouldered man row with one hand while balancing a long pole with the other. The ferry rocks gently, passengers murmuring softly under straw hats. Then when the moment is right, he reaches under the bench and pulls out a small cylindrical bundle tied with rope. His lunch. Not just functional, ingenious. Bamboo tubes, that's the magic. Long, narrow stalks of bamboo cut, hollowed, dried, and sealed at one end with tightly packed rice or beeswax. The other end capped with a sliding lid or a simple cloth and tied shut with braided twine. They were shock-proof, water-resistant, and ideal for a life lived half on land, half on current. You watch as he unties the knot and taps the tube against his knee to loosen the contents. Inside, rice, still warm, from the morning fire, stacked with thin shavings of dried bonito and a few preserved plums tucked tightly at the bottom. Minimal but hearty. Just enough salt and protein to keep a man rowing through tides and typhoons. Historians still argue whether these river lunches were born out of necessity or evolved into their own tradition. Either way, the river workers swore by them. You could drop one in the canal, fish it out, and eat it like nothing happened. Try doing that with a lacquered bento box. Spoiler, don't. And it wasn't just ferry workers. Fishermen, canal cleaners, even rice bag haulers all had variations of the tube lunch. Some added a dried gourd cork to keep out splashes. Others waxed the interior with sesame oil for flavor and waterproofing. You think modern waterproof containers are clever? Edo's boatmen were centuries ahead and far more stylish about it. Not all tube lunches were plain, though. You once saw a dock worker unscrew a double-chambered bamboo case. The top half was rice mixed with barley. The bottom had something astonishing, rolled slices of pickled squid dyed pink and tucked with shiso leaves. He said his sister packed it for him every Monday, unless she was mad at him. Then it was just cold rice and a dirty look. Food reflected emotion in the Edo world, even among boatmen. If your tube came with an unexpected sweet, like a sugar-dusted bean ball or a candied chestnut, it meant someone at home forgave you for something. A lunch with no seasoning. That wasn't an accident. That was a warning. There's a boy sitting on the dock nearby, maybe 12. He's peeling open a lotus leaf wrap, carefully unfolding each damp corner until a small, tightly packed mound of rice and dried sardine is revealed. Lotus leaves were another brilliant innovation, waterproof, naturally antibacterial, and let's be honest, wildly photogenic. You can practically see it now in a modern Tokyo lunch cafe being sold for 10 times the price. Lunch on the water had to be portable, practical, and quiet. Boatmen didn't get lunch breaks. They ate between stops, often with one hand on the rudder. No spilling, no complicated chopstick maneuvers. You saw one man last week eat his entire meal using a single toothpick, like some kind of culinary ninja. But there was also community in this kind of eating. On slower days, boatmen tied up their vessels beside each other and opened their tubes together, trading pickles, gossip, and weather predictions. One guy would have spicy daikon, another marinated egg. Someone always had too much rice and not enough topping, and a quiet barter would follow. No words, just chopsticks and nods, an unspoken currency of kindness. And the tools they carried, some had mini knives for slicing dried fish tucked into their belts. Others carried hand-carved chopsticks in hollow gourds slung from their waists. If you were lucky, you'd catch a glimpse of a bone spoon, rare, slightly curved, and perfect for scooping miso paste if the meal included a cup of soup, which it usually didn't, but hey, a man can dream. You look over and spot a group of older boatmen laughing softly. One is chewing on a strip of kombu, the seaweed softened by steam, the salt still strong. He pauses, then points to your feet. You've nearly stepped on someone's lunch bundle. Oops, you borrow. He waves it off with a grin and tosses you a pickled plum from his own meal. You catch it? It's aggressively sour. You nod your thanks through watering eyes. That's how it went on the rivers. No elegant boxes, no embroidered napkins, just bamboo leaves, salt and rice. It was messy. It was efficient. It was honest. You wonder how many of these men still use the same tubes their fathers carved. How many lunches were eaten under this exact sky? How many shared pickles held together friendships stronger than rope? You sit by the dock's edge, feet dangling over the water, A breeze lifts your sleeve. Somewhere a lunchbox clicks shut. Another knot is tied, and a boat pulls away from shore. And just like that, the river swallows the day. You leave the river behind, feet still damp. From a splash you didn't quite dodge, and follow the path toward a quieter neighborhood. Here the buildings huddle close together, low wood framed with bamboo fences, and drying herbs swaying from rafters. The hum of daily life fades into something softer, the chatter of sparrows, the occasional thump of a ball against a courtyard wall, and the fluttering footsteps of schoolboys. One of them nearly runs into you barefoot, grinning with ink smudges on his hands and a scroll stuffed under his arm. He calls out an apology, barely slowing down, and disappears around the corner toward his temple school. You pause, then follow, not because you're nosy, well, maybe a little, but because you're curious about his lunch. When you reach the school gate, a small crowd of boys is already seated under the pine tree in the yard. They laugh, jostle, and pull out their bento. Some are wrapped in cloth, others in paper, but they all unfold their lunches with reverence, like they're opening treasure chests, and in a way they are. One boy has a tiny one-tier box. Inside there's white rice pressed flat, decorated with nori cutouts. Not just sprinkled cut, into the shape of kanji. His mother, clearly both patient and passive-aggressive, has written study hard using seaweed. Another kid holds up his lunch to show off a face made from fish, flakes, pickled plum, and egg. Some sort of owl, maybe, it's hard to tell. Everyone laughs. Historians still argue whether decorative lunchboxes were primarily for children's enjoyment or as an early form of motherly surveillance. Either way, it worked. You couldn't eat that smiley face onigiri without wondering if your mom was watching from somewhere behind a curtain. Temple schools in Edo weren't all solemn study and brushstroke drills. They were also where kids learned manners, community, and perhaps most memorably, how to trade snacks. One boy has only plain rice, but offers a dried chestnut in exchange for a piece of tamagoyaki. Another offers a pickled burdock stick to the kid with the best box. Negotiations are swift, ruthless, and mostly silent. You're watching future merchants at work. There's a story, possibly apocryphal but delightful, of a boy who once received a whole grilled sardine in his lunch. Instead of eating it, he traded it every day for smaller treats until he had enough pickled ginger to fill a jar. He became a spice merchant later in life. Coincidence, maybe? You spot a quieter boy sitting on the edge of the group. His lunchbox is unwrapped, but he hasn't opened it yet. He's reading something on a slip of paper tucked under the lid. You glance again. It's seaweed, a thin sheet of nori with a message delicately traced in sesame oil, invisible unless held to the light. You lean slightly, catching a glimpse of the characters. You are not alone. You feel something tighten in your chest. Not sadness, not pity, just the soft gravity of love pressed into food. Mothers and occasionally fathers found endless ways to send messages through lunch. A folded paper crane slipped under the rice. A single umeboshi packed on the left side instead of the center, meaning come straight home. Or a lunch packed without seasoning as a silent cue. We need to talk. Even the number of items could mean something. 5 pickles might say, I believe in you. 7 could mean forgive me. A missing slice of sweet potato might be an accident or a statement. Scholars debate whether this coded communication was widespread or just urban legend. But your heart doesn't care. It believes it.
The boy finishes reading, smiles faintly, and begins to eat. No theatrics. Just small, methodical bites. He's saving the pickled plum for last. Classic move. You watch as the students eat, joke, and brush rice grains off their sleeves. None of them seem aware that this moment, this ordinary lunch under an ordinary tree, is something they'll remember years from now, when they're merchants or scribes or wandering poets, when their own children unwrap lunchboxes and find seaweed letters waiting. A teacher steps outside calling them back in. The boys jump up, scramble to pack up, and run off with varying degrees of coordination. The quiet boy lingers a second longer, ties his box neatly, and places the message back under the lid. Then he walks inside. You're left in the shade, the sound of laughter fading behind sliding doors. A breeze carries the scent of vinegar and pine. A blackbird caws once, then flutters off. You stand slowly, brushing dust from your sleeves. You're not sure what the lesson was today, but you feel like you just attended class anyway. As you step away from the temple schoolyard, the scent of pine fades and something more herbal takes its place. You've wandered into a small back alley lined with vegetable stalls, stacked radishes, twisted burdock roots, and baskets of mustard greens spill out onto the street like a painter's palette. An old woman sits on a stool peeling ginger with a blade no longer than your finger. She doesn't look up, but she does offer you a slice. You take it. It bites back. Perfect. And now you begin to see lunch through a new lens. Because in Edo era, Japan vegetables were never just side dishes. They were commentary. Quiet, edible opinions about who you were, what you believed, and sometimes what you dared not say aloud. Take burdock, for instance, gobo. It's fibrous, earthy, a little bitter, the kind of root you have to earn. People from Kyoto often mocked Edoites for their love of it. Too plain, they said, too brown. But Edo folk didn't care. To them, gobo was honest, resilient. It grew where others wouldn't like commoners in the capital. Then there's lotus root, rank and sliced thin to reveal perfect symmetrical holes. It symbolized clarity of mind and spiritual insight. If you found it in your lunch, your packer was either deeply philosophical or just good with a knife. Historians still argue whether the specific vegetables in bento were chosen primarily for nutrition or social symbolism, but evidence leans toward both. Carrots weren't just orange, they were optimism. Taro signaled tradition. Eggplant, slippery and rich, was a nod to ambition and seasonal grace. And don't even get started on daikon. Pickled, raw, simmered, shredded, how you served it. Said more than your family crest. You pass a pair of young women comparing their lunches on a shop stoop. One has a dainty collection of simmered vegetables neatly separated. The other, a chaotic, joyful mess of leftovers and bright yellow pickled turnip. One smiles politely. The other laughs loudly. You can tell who packed which. Sometimes a vegetable's absence said more than its presence. During periods of political tension, people quietly avoided certain ingredients linked to rival regions. A Kyoto pickled green in Edo lunchboxes bold. Maybe foolish. If you were trying to impress a new employer or in-laws, you stuck to local humble fare. no risky routes. There's an apocryphal tale about a man who proposed marriage using a bento. In it, he placed 7 vegetables each, beginning with a syllable that spelled out the phrase, "Please accept my heart." She refused, not because she didn't love him, but because she hated mushrooms. Tragic, but honest. Even the arrangement of vegetables mattered. Bento was like ikebana flour, arranging but edible. Balance, color, and texture were crucial. A crisp radish needed something soft beside it. A bitter green needed contrast from a sweet yam. You couldn't just toss vegetables in and call it done. You had to compose them like a poem you eat. And that brings you to the rarest of all vegetables, the rebellious one. You've heard stories always whispered of wives who deliberately pack a bitter herb or overly spicy root when angry with their husbands. One case in the city records even lists a domestic complaint involving excessive ginger as a provocation. The judge dismissed it, but his lunch that day reportedly was plain rice, no garnish. Vegetables also signaled class. Poorer families often relied on tsukemono and wild greens free to forage if you knew where to look. Richer households had access to mountain yams, tender bamboo shoots, and fancy mushrooms cultivated in humid cellars. But sometimes it was the simple cabbage leaf that carried the most love, tucked gently between rice and pickles to keep the flavors from blending. You pass a tea house kitchen where a line of workers is peeling squash, their movements hypnotic. One is humming. Another pauses to cut a tiny maple leaf shape from a carrot before tossing it into a pile. These vegetables will feed dozens, couriers, performers, scribes, and artisans each lunch, a quiet testimony to someone's handwork. And then there were seasonal cues. Certain vegetables only appeared at certain times. Bitter melon in early summer, chestnuts in autumn, snow-salted greens in winter. You could guess the date within a week just by looking at someone's lunch. That's how closely the Edo diet followed the calendar. Your bento didn't just nourish you, it synchronized you with the seasons. A boy walks past with a bundle in his hands. The smell tells you it's roasted sweet potato, still warm, charred at the edges. He's probably saving it for dessert, or maybe it is his lunch. You nod. Respect. You reach a quiet bench and sit beneath a persimmon tree. A single orange fruit dangles above you, unripe and defiant. You open your own bundle, modest but lovingly packed. Inside, a medley of vegetables simmered: daikon, salted cucumber, shredded burdock, and a slice of sweet kabocha. The colors are rich but not gaudy. The balance is perfect. It says someone thought about you this morning, and for a moment you're not hungry, just thankful. The street turns narrow again, bending toward a cluster of homes with smoke curling softly from their kitchens. You hear the clack of knife against cutting board, the hiss of something meeting a hot pan, and then something unfamiliar. A smell you can't quite place. It's rich, pungent, slightly sweet, slightly dangerous. You follow your nose toward a small courtyard where a middle-aged woman is squatting beside a clay stove, stirring a blackened pan. You ask with a gesture what it is. She grins. "Narazushi," she says, tapping the edge of a box beside her. "Fermented fish." Your stomach shifts, unsure whether to be intrigued or alarmed, because yes, this was another hallmark of Edo-era Lunchboxes fish,
so fresh it was already halfway decomposed, and somehow it was a delicacy. She offers you a sliver.
You hesitate. Then, in the name of history and peer pressure, you accept. It's intense, salty, tangy, a bit funky, but weirdly good, like someone took your sushi, locked it in a cave for 3 months, and dared it to survive. Fermented fish was one of the great acquired tastes of the Edo diet, especially narazushi, an ancient technique where freshwater fish, often carp, was packed in salted rice and left to ferment for weeks or even months. The rice turned sour. The fish turned sharp.
The result was edible shelf-stable and oddly beloved. Historians still argue whether people actually liked the taste or just appreciated the convenience. But there's little debate that it made its way into countless lunchboxes, particularly in regions far from the sea where preserving fish was more than a luxury, it was survival. And it wasn't just narazushi. There was hoshizakana, sun-dried fish, sometimes grilled before packing, shiokara, fermented fish guts, if you were brave or possibly reckless, and tatami iwashi, tiny sardines pressed into wafer-thin sheets like edible paper. You'd break off a corner chew thoughtfully and pretend not to notice the tiny eyeballs staring back. You once saw a traveling performer unwrap his bento in a public square. Inside was nothing but rice and a thick slice of pickled mackerel glistening with oil and smell. He ate it like he was tasting his childhood. No words, just slow chewing and a faraway look. Food, after all, has memory. Some bentos came with grilled eel kabayaki, brushed with a sweet soy glaze, packed on a bed of rice. If you had that in your lunch, it meant 2 things: someone loved you very much, and you were having a good day. Eel wasn't cheap. It was celebration food, passed carefully from market to pan to box to mouth, like a treasure being escorted. Fermented fish products also had a tactical advantage. They were compact, didn't spoil easily, and packed enough umami to make plain rice feel like a feast. A single sliver of miso-marinated cod could flavor an entire portion of grain. Edo efficiency at its finest. Of course, not everyone was a fan. There's a preserved letter from a young samurai complaining that his host's odorous bento had driven him to eat alone under a tree. He included a sketch of a very distressed rice ball. The drawing is surprisingly good. Some homes had entire shelves dedicated to dried seafood ingredients. Bonito flakes, sardines, dried scallops. Mothers would roast them briefly over hot coals in the morning, then wrap them in thin paper or linen and tuck them gently beside the rice, not touching it, just near it. That way, the scent flavored the entire meal like perfume in a sealed room. Then there were fish cakes, kamaboko made from pounded white fish, shaped into pink and white spirals or pressed into decorative molds. These were favorites for festivals and special occasions. If your lunch included kamaboko, it meant someone had taken the time to grind steam slice and smile. Fish wasn't just nourishment in Edo, it was rhythm. Market bells rang based on the catch. Boats timed their docking with the tides. Cooks memorized the moon cycle because certain fish only fermented properly in specific humidity. You think your meal prep app is helpful? Try living by the sea with no refrigerator and a fish that could turn on you by lunch. A breeze wafts past, carrying the unmistakable scent of grilled sorry. Someone nearby is roasting it whole, turning it with chopsticks, like a patient clockmaker. The skin crackles, the eyes cloud over, and the fish hisses like it's whispering a secret. You watch as a delivery boy picks up a wooden box from the porch. His job, bento courier. He'll carry it across the city past bridges and paper lanterns, delivering lunch from wife to husband, mother to student cook to merchant. Inside, probably fish, probably fermented, probably delicious. You rise from your crouch, bow to the woman, and continue on. The taste of fermented carp still lingers in your mouth. You're not sure if you like it, but you're sure you'll remember it, and that in the end is the point. You duck under a low wooden gate and step into a quieter residential alley where the air seems stiller and every footstep feels like it echoes. There's laundry drying on lines, children whispering from behind sliding doors, and the faint clatter of something in a kitchen. You're about to explore a part of the bento story, often kept behind closed doors, where the lunchbox meets its most complicated ingredient, the human heart. Specifically the woman's heart. Because if rice was the centerpiece and fish the flair, then the one who packed the bento, the hand behind the scenes, was often a wife, a mother, a sister, and sometimes a rebel. In Edo society, domestic roles were tightly scripted. Women were expected to manage the home, prepare the food, and keep things neat, quiet, and orderly. But that doesn't mean they didn't speak. They just used different tools. A pinch of spice, a missing garnish. A rice ball, shaped too sharply. The lunchbox could become a conversation, one-sided, sure, but potent. You pass a pair of older women sitting on a porch, peeling taro roots into a basket. They chatter softly, barely glancing up as they work. One laughs at something the other says, then tosses a slice aside with exaggerated flair. You don't know what was said, but the gesture speaks volumes. The subtext in Edo kitchens was thick enough to slice with a fish knife. Behind many neatly tied furoshiki was a small, ongoing act of devotion, or negotiation, or occasionally passive aggression. A man might leave the house grumbling about politics, but if his bento held his favorite pickled radish sliced extra thin, he'd know she was still on his side, or at least pretending to be. Historians still argue whether women used bento packing as a form of subtle protest or simply creative expression in a limited world. But there are recorded instances that suggest both. One case involved a wife who packed the same lunch-cold rice, no pickles, for 18 straight days. On the 19th day, her husband brought home flowers. Peace was restored. And yet many bentos packed by women weren't silent protests at all. They were soft apologies, encouragement, pride too shy to say itself out loud. A little extra sesame sprinkled over the rice. A hand-carved vegetable flour. The best cuts of fish chosen before anyone else in the house even woke up. You once met a widow who still packed 2 lunches every morning, one for herself, one for her husband's grave. She never said much about it, just smiled and adjusted the knot on the cloth before setting out. He always liked his pickles on the left, she once murmured. You nodded and didn't ask more. There's something hauntingly intimate about a lunchbox packed with care by someone who won't be there when you open it. Every lid that lifts carries a bit of absence, a bit of hope. And then, of course, there were the playful ones. Bento used to flirt, a single umeboshi placed just so, a note tucked into the rice, or a rice ball shaped into a heart. Obvious, risky, and potentially mortifying if opened in front of the wrong crowd. But love, like wasabi, is sometimes best served with a little sting. You walk past a courtyard where a girl, no older than 12, is packing her younger brother's lunch. She works with quiet focus, using chopsticks far too long for her hands. She presses a rice ball flat, adds a strip of seaweed, and frowns at it. Not cute enough, she removes it, tries again, adds a plum. Better. She wraps the box carefully, ties the cloth with a double knot, and sets it by the door with a tiny smile. Lunch, it seems, is also a lesson. Some wives in Edo even gained reputations in their neighborhoods based solely on their bento style. Ah, she's the one who does the lotus root in spirals. Did you see the squash flowers in his lunch yesterday? That's her again. Like culinary calling cards, passed without words. You didn't need to be a poet or painter to be remembered. You just needed a box, a knife, and a little leftover rice. But it wasn't all idyllic. There were quiet tragedies too. The lunch packed by a mother for a son leaving for conscription. The wife who sent her husband off to sea and waited years still packing his meal every morning until she couldn't anymore. There are stories of lunchboxes found unopened long after their owners had gone missing. Food gone stale. Rice hardened. Love preserved too long. You feel that weight a little as you sit on a low step unwrapping your own bundle. It's simple today. Salted rice, a piece of roasted sweet potato, and a single slice of ginger laid across the top. Someone thought about you. Maybe yesterday. Maybe years ago. You eat in silence. A cat watches from the fence post. The sun moves slightly across the sky. There's power in a small box, in the hands that fill it, and in the stories it carries, whether told or not. The streets are a little busier now, the sun tilting just enough to cast longer shadows across the shutters. You find yourself drifting through a quieter district, lined with workshops and artist studios, places where the sound of saws, brushes, and inkstones replace the bells and bartering of the city center. And here, tucked into corners between calligraphy scrolls and carved masks, are people who eat alone, but not in sadness. You pass a paper merchant hunched over his stall, brushing faint lines onto a new ledger. He doesn't look up. Beside him, wrapped in a simple striped cloth, is a lunchbox barely larger than your hand. It sits open on a folded towel, rice pressed into a neat corner, pickled plum off-center, and 2 slices of grilled yam nestled like quotation marks. It's quiet, thoughtful, unshared. This was another facet of Edo life that doesn't often get celebrated, the solitary lunch. The idea that a meal didn't have to be social to be sacred. That one could eat slowly, quietly, without needing to fill the air with talk. You begin to realize that in this world, silence was a condiment, and some people preferred their lunch flavored with peace. Artists were particularly fond of this, not necessarily because they were antisocial, but because their minds stayed noisy even in stillness. The calligrapher who refused to eat with others so he wouldn't disturb his inner line. The haiku poet who composed entire verses on the back of his napkin before touching a grain of rice. the puppet maker who lined his bento with little sketches of the characters he was carving. Historians still debate whether the solitary bento was a cultural norm or simply an artist's quirk. But plenty of journals suggest that lone lunches weren't unusual, especially among scribes, woodblock printers, and wandering monks. In fact, some schools even encouraged eating in observation. That is, sitting beside your lunch and noticing it before devouring it. Colors, textures, the way the rice steamed in the light. You find a small bench near a plum tree and decide to try it. You unwrap your cloth slowly. Rice warm, pickle bright, fried tofu, slightly oily, crisped at the edges. You pause. No one is talking. Nothing interrupts. And for a strange, delicious moment, it feels like the whole city is eating with you in shared silence. There's an old saying, to eat alone is to meet yourself at the table. You never understood it before. Now it makes a little more sense. Not all solo eaters were introspective by choice. Some were traveling scholars between posts. Some were widows. Some just preferred their own company. One famous woodblock artist reportedly ate the same lunch every day for 30 years. White rice, miso, pickles, and a single dried apricot. When asked why, he said, "It keeps me from getting distracted by ambition." A monk wanders past you, robes brushing against the dirt path. He sits nearby, unwraps his own lunch, just boiled barley, maybe some greens. No fanfare. He eats with care, every bite measured. You get the feeling he's said more prayers with his chopsticks than most people do with their mouths. You remember hearing about the bowl of stillness tradition in certain monasteries. Each lunch begins with a moment of complete stillness. One breath, one pause, one thank you. Then and only then does the meal begin. You try it. It feels strange. And then necessary. Of course not. All quiet lunches were spiritual. Some were strategic. A merchant you once met claimed he ate alone because chewing loudly is bad for business. Others preferred it to avoid small talk or gossip. One woman, a basket weaver, simply said, "Lunch is when I hear myself think." Fair enough. There were even designated spots in Edo for eating alone, small garden alcoves, shrine steps, quiet alleys where vendors left you in peace. No pressure, no questions, just you and the lunch someone packed or that you packed for yourself. And when people did notice solitary eaters, they didn't pity them. They envied them a little. That kind of calm isn't easy to find. You finish your tofu, slowly licking a bit of sauce from your thumb. A crow caws from the roof. A breeze moves the plum branches. Somewhere nearby, someone's bento box clicks shut. You rise from your bench feeling steadier. Not full, not empty, just centered. As if the box held more than food. As if it offered a little anchor in the tide of the day. And so you walk on. Not searching, not rushing. Just letting your steps carry you one quiet breath at a time. You head toward the edge of the craftsman district where the lanes grow tighter, the buildings lean in like they're sharing secrets and signs of industry shift to signs of exhaustion. Here people work hard, share spaces, and more often than not eat together. But not always nicely. Because while bento culture in Edo is usually remembered as thoughtful, artful, and serene, there was also a darker, messier reality lurking under the lid, namely lunchbox crimes. You step into the shaded courtyard of a small tenement complex where laborers and apprentices are seated shoulder to shoulder, cross-legged on the ground, eating their midday meals. At first glance, it's all peaceful quiet, chewing the occasional slurp of miso, a laugh or two. But then someone yelps, "Hey, who took my pickles?" Ah, there it is. You've just stumbled into the other side of bento passive-aggressive theft, food swapping, and silent revenge. Because in cramped communal quarters, a well-packed lunch becomes a kind of currency, and sometimes people steal it. The theft might be small, one slice of egg here, a bit of rice there, but it carries meaning. A missing plum could be an honest mistake, or a declaration of workplace warfare. Historians still argue whether bento theft was mostly playful or if it sometimes escalated into genuine conflict. The surviving stories suggest both. One well-known tale tells of a carpenter's apprentice who carved an exact replica of his lunch out of wood, lacquered it, and placed it in his usual box. The thief bit into it, broke a tooth, and fled the job site. No one confessed, but the message was clear. Don't mess with another man's onigiri. There's also the case of the pickled chili incident. A woman living in a shared house grew tired of someone sneaking bites from her rice, so she planted a tiny fiery red chili right in the center. Looked like umeboshi, tasted like fire. The next day her rice remained untouched. You sit beside a group of stonemasons. One unwraps his bento and frowns. "It's missing the tofu," he mutters. Another shrugs. "Maybe your wife's mad." A third nods solemnly. "Or maybe she's testing you." They all eat in silence after that. Bento becomes a battlefield without a single sword drawn. These lunchroom dramas weren't just limited to theft. There were also silent judgments, like when someone opened their box and it smelled too good. Jealous glances followed. Comments like, "Oh, your wife had time to cook eel this morning," or "Must be nice to afford 2 kinds of pickle." These weren't compliments. These were barbs. And then came the comparison wars. Whose lunch was prettier? Whose tamagoyaki held its shape best? Whose rice stayed warm the longest? Some people packed their meals the night before. Others had partners who woke up before dawn to fry the fish just right. Either way, lunch became a performance, and not everyone got a standing ovation. You pass a scribe's office and catch sight of an older clerk opening his lunch. He smiles faintly, then pulls out 2 boxes, his and a smaller one. "My daughter," he says to no one. "She packs one for me, one for the cat." You blink. He's spoiled, he adds, setting the box on the windowsill, where a gray cat immediately appears. The cat eats daintily like it knows it's winning. Even among friends, lunches carry tension. There's a diary from an Edo actor who wrote that his co-stars would constantly peek into his bento and comment. One day, fed up, he packed nothing but a note that read, "Now you have something real to gossip about." And there were whole classes of bento meant to send a message. A misaligned furoshiki meant the packer was rushed or careless. Overstuffed boxes could signal guilt, underfilled ones, resentment. One woman supposedly packed only rice and an empty soy sauce bottle for 3 weeks until her husband finally apologized for missing her birthday. He never forgot again. But perhaps the most tragic bento crime wasn't theft or judgment. It was apathy. You once met a man who said, "I'd rather they stole my lunch than packed it without care." He unwrapped a bento once filled with cold rice, no seasoning, and a slice of radish so thick it cracked his tooth. He ate it anyway. But he never forgot the feeling of being unloved, packed into every bite. Still, these lunchbox crimes had their counterweights. Sometimes the thief left a replacement sweet. Sometimes a friend slipped a snack into your box without telling you. Sometimes after a fight, someone tucked a piece of your favorite fish into the rice without a word. Apologies without voices. Forgiveness without eye contact. You step away from the courtyard's stomach, rumbling again, not from hunger, but from the complexity of it all. Lunch in Edo was never just lunch. It was a mirror, a message, a miniature stage where love, resentment, humor, and revenge played out in pickles and rice. And as you round the corner, a boy yells from behind, "Hey, that's my bento." You don't look back, but you smile. Somewhere, someone's getting exactly what they deserve. You turn onto a broader avenue now, where the crowds thicken and the clack of sandals grows louder. The smells shift too, less fish and smoke, more straw and sweat. It's mid-afternoon in the heart of Edo, and as you weave through the bustling marketplace, it becomes strikingly clear not all lunchboxes were created equal. Here in the blur between the merchant stalls and the backbreaking rhythm of street labor, you see the full spectrum of midday meals from the extravagant to the almost invisible. And nowhere is the divide more visible than in the bento boxes of the imperial court versus those of the field hands. You pause to watch a noble's palanquin slide past, carried by 6 coordinated men in crisp livery. Inside the curtained box, likely a court official or aristocrat reclining in silk and heading home for a second lunch. Behind them, a servant carries a multi-tiered bento box carved from lacquered Zelkova wood, each layer a feast unto itself. One tier will have rice steamed, flavored, possibly sprinkled with gold leaf. Another might offer sweet egg omelets, seared slices of duck, or rare mountain vegetables hand-picked at dawn. A third could contain delicate sweets, rice cakes, sugared chestnuts, or preserved plum blossoms. The box alone might cost more than a field worker earns in 6 months. Historians still argue whether these lavish boxes were primarily about nutrition or theater, but the answer is probably both. For court officials, lunch wasn't merely a meal, it was an extension of their authority, refinement, and wealth. Bento became a stage where power and taste mingled, where culinary perfection was expected, not admired. Compare that to what you see a few blocks over, where a group of rice porters huddle in the shade shirts, soaked through arms like knotted rope. One of them pulls out a simple lunch, just a palm leaf wrap tied with twine. Inside cold barley rice, maybe a sliver of pickled turnip. That's it. And yet the look on his face as he takes the first bite says everything. You sit down near them, keeping to yourself. No one offers a greeting, but no one tells you to leave either. One man opens a pouch and shares a dried anchovy with a friend. Another passes a cup of barley tea, more water than flavor. Theirs is a lunch of necessity. Fuel, a pause before the next sack of rice. And yet there's dignity here. No complaints,
just hunger, meeting its match. There's a story from the archives about a visiting envoy who dropped his elaborate bento in the street. Before his attendants could retrieve it, a young stable boy scooped it up, bowed, and returned it untouched. It looked too perfect to eat, he said. The envoy was so impressed, he offered the boy a job. The boy declined. I already have rice, he answered. Bento could humble as much as it glorified. In the rural outskirts, farmers often wrapped their lunches in thick leaves, not just to keep the heat out, but to remind themselves of the cycle they were part of. Rice planted with aching backs now eaten with gratitude. Bento here was spiritual, not theatrical. The box might be bamboo or straw, often homemade. The rice course mixed with millet. The side dishes. Whatever hadn't spoiled overnight. You pass a woman tending to bundles of vegetables, her hands calloused and quick. She unwraps her own lunch with a mother's efficiency, eating with one hand while her other rocks a cradle made of woven reed. Her bento is sparse but precise, a strip of burdock, a pinch of sesame, 2 bites of salted yam. It's enough, not luxurious, not embarrassing, just enough. And even among the poor there were variations. Apprentices might get lunch packed by their masters' wives. Travelers received bentos from roadside inns, often cold, sometimes meager, but occasionally beautiful in their simplicity. A single boiled egg nestled in rice, a slice of dried persimmon to sweeten the road ahead. Then there were the beggars, those with no lunchboxes at all. You once saw a woman hand a half-eaten rice ball to a blind man near the Kanda River. He accepted it like a gift from the gods. No words were exchanged, just a nod, just rice. Food in Edo was never simply sustenance. It was memory, status, love, humility, and the lunchbox was its canvas. You reach the edge of the market where a vendor is selling empty bento boxes, cheap ones made of pressed wood, slightly stained at the corners. But they're still beautiful, still ready to be filled with meaning. You pick one up. It's light, plain. But you wonder who will carry it next? What will they pack? Who will open it and smile or frown or cry a little when they find a favorite food waiting? The nobleman's lacquered box and the farmer's leaf wrap, they both tell stories. Neither more important than the other. You set the box down gently and walk on. The smell of grilled fish rises in the air again, mingling with the scent of straw sweat and the ever-present whisper of steamed rice. And in every direction someone is eating, or about to. You drift past the market stalls, the crowd thinning as you reach a quieter street, one lined not with homes or temples, but with tiny workshops, doorless eateries, and a small wooden cart with something particularly curious. Stacked high bento boxes. Dozens of them, all shapes and sizes piled like miniature buildings in a paper city. A man behind the cart waves you over. You've arrived at one of Edo's busiest micro-industries, the bento economy. It's easy to forget in all the artistry and emotion wrapped up in a single lunch that behind every box there's a complex web of people making it all happen. Carvers, cleaners, vendors, porters, farmers. Even the man selling pickles by the bridge plays his part. Bento was never just personal, it was commercial, and for some, it was everything. You nod to the vendor. He lifts a box lid and shows off his wares, empty, polished, and ready for food.
Some are plain pine, others are cedar infused faintly with the scent of trees. A few are painted with simple red strokes, flowers curling up the corners. You ask him how many he sells in a day. Depends on how many people forgot their box, he says with a grin, or how many husbands need to apologize. Historians still argue whether bento vending truly boomed during the Edo period or whether its peak came later. But surviving ledgers from the time paint a clear picture. Entire neighborhoods made their living off the back of lunch. There were bento box makers, of course some with apprenticeships lasting years, especially in the craft of majiwapa, the elegantly bent cedar boxes shaped without nails or glue. Then there were the food vendors, women who rose before dawn to prepare mass lunches for travelers, students, or workers too busy to cook. These were known as kashi bento, or rented lunches. You'd pay a few coins, eat, and return the box later. The box was washed and reused the next day. Eco-friendly, long before anyone invented the word. You pass one such woman now. She's standing behind a narrow table with 6 boxes laid out, each a different arrangement of rice pickles and simmered vegetables. She nods as a carpenter walks by, tosses her 2 coins, and grabs the box on the far right without breaking stride. She doesn't call out after him. She already knows he'll return the box tomorrow, probably with a thank you sweet. Children also took part. In some neighborhoods, young boys earned pocket money delivering lunches for wealthier families. You'd spot them darting between buildings, a box in each hand, careful not to tip the precious cargo. A misplaced box could mean a ruined uniform, or worse, a ruined proposal. You recall a tale of a lunch boy who delivered the wrong bento to the wrong office, sparking a scandal. When a noblewoman's love letter ended up in a bureaucrat's lunch. He married his assistant 2 months later. Coincidence, maybe. Bento magic. Probably.
You turn a corner and step into a small shop where rice polishers are hard at work. In Edo, rice was often stored with its husk intact and had to be polished by hand, usually by women in shifts, sitting on low stools, grinding grain against stone. A good polish meant better texture, better flavor, better everything. They'd sing as they worked soft songs about harvest rain or heartbreak. You hear the echoes now, woven into the creak of the floorboards. And don't forget the wrappers. Every bento needed a furoshiki, the cloth used to bind and carry it. Shops sold them in every color and pattern. Some even stitched family crests into the corners. It wasn't just packaging. It was personality. A boy with a dragon pattern cloth was clearly ambitious. A girl with plum blossoms graceful. A plain brown one humble or just practical. Even chopstick makers had a place in the bento economy. Shops sold portable sets with sleeves, some carved from sandalwood, others plain bamboo. You'd reuse them for years. The idea of disposable anything would have made an Edo merchant faint on the spot. The economy of lunch reached all the way to the farmers' fields. Rice growers timed their planting so that harvest aligned with major festivals when bento demand spiked. Pickle merchants preserved vegetables in giant barrels, rotating stock through seasons and storing enough to feed entire neighborhoods through the winter. Fishmongers salted and sun-dried fillets for longevity.
often with special orders for particular customers who liked their mackerel just dry enough to argue with you. Even ink makers got a piece of the pie. Some households left little lunch notes, short poems or instructions, written on rice paper, slipped under the lid. One popular seller advertised ink as gentle enough for paper, bold enough for the heart. You step back outside and glance at your own lunchbox, now empty. You think of all the people who made this one quiet meal possible. The farmer, the polisher, the carver, the wrapper, the cook, maybe the vendor, maybe the writer of the little haiku tucked under your rice yesterday. A bento might seem like a gift from one person to another, but in truth, it's a citywide collaboration. Every box tells the story of 1,000 quiet jobs, 100 tiny rituals, and one enduring truth. Even in the smallest things, Ito found a way to turn survival into beauty. You close your box gently, not just out of respect, but because somewhere out there someone made it, and their work deserves a soft ending. As you walk, the bustle begins to fade again, replaced by a quieter rhythm, not the lull of silence, but of intent. You've entered a part of Edo where the air seems to hum with unspoken feeling, where bento, already intimate, becomes something even more delicate. Because here, the lunchbox becomes a love letter. You pass a narrow alley where two young apprentices sit shoulder to shoulder, not speaking. One unwraps his bento with a hint of nervousness, glancing sideways. Inside rice, yes, but also a pattern made from pickled plum slices, arranged carefully into the shape of a heart. His face flushes. He doesn't comment. Neither does his companion. But both smile just enough to betray everything. This was not uncommon. Edo-era bento had its own unspoken grammar of romance, where modern lovers might exchange texts or flowers. Young Edo hearts packed their feelings between layers of rice and seaweed, discreet, delicious, and just ambiguous enough to maintain plausible deniability. Historians still argue whether the octopus-shaped carrot was invented during this time or later, but early woodblock prints depict charmingly sculpted vegetables tucked into boxes, exchanged between friends, lovers, and those on the verge of both. Food was coded language. A sweet-rolled omelet might say, "I noticed you like soft things." A double-layered rice ball, "I'm thinking about you when I'm alone." A missing pickle, "Ask me why later." Some lovers developed their own edible dialects. 3 lotus slices meant "I miss you." A second helping of rice, "I'm ready to be serious." Once a poet famously courted his future wife through bento, alone leaving her a different box every day for 2 weeks, each one packed with a seasonal verse carved from dried seaweed. She said yes on day 12. His bento that day. A single hard-boiled egg shaped like the full moon. You turn into a courtyard and spot a girl waiting beneath a cherry tree clutching a lunchbox, tied with an elaborate red and white furoshiki. She's nervous. Adjusts the knot, rechecks the contents. This is clearly not a casual lunch. Eventually a boy arrives, awkward, smiling, unsure where to put his hands. She offers the box without a word. He bows, opens it. You catch a flash of pink radish and yellow omelet, perfectly symmetrical. His face softens. They sit down. Still no words. Just a shared moment and the sound of chopsticks clicking softly in rhythm. You step away. That felt like spying, but in a sweet way. It reminds you that food has always been a delivery system for emotion. And when words fail or would embarrass, it's easier to say, I like you with vinegar rice than with trembling syllables. Love bentos didn't just live among the young.
Long married couples had their own lunchbox shorthand. A missing fish might mean we need to talk. An extra pickle I'm sorry about yesterday. One widow you met once packed her late husband's favorite bento every year on their anniversary and left it by the Konda River. He always came home late, she told you with a smile. But he always came home. There were also sad bentos. Boxes packed with too much care, opened by someone already drifting away. A wife once packed her husband's favorite foods for a trip he never returned from. She kept the box sealed for a week, then ate it herself, 1 bite per day, like a slow goodbye. Of course, there were jokes. 2, friends played pranks, replacing plum with pickled ginger, or hiding a whole roasted garlic in the rice. Harmless enough unless it was delivered before a formal meeting. You recall a story of a man who opened his bento to find it entirely filled with beans. No rice, just beans. A statement he later said on how predictable he had become. You smile? Bento love wasn't always romantic. Sometimes it was playful, sometimes wistful, sometimes just a quiet reminder. You matter enough for someone to cut your carrot into a flower. There's a small shop nearby selling bento molds. Hearts, stars, spirals. A woman holds one up and says to her daughter, "This one for tomorrow." The girl nods solemnly. He likes stars. You don't know who he is, but you're already rooting for her. You pause to eat. Today's lunch is from a stall, a purchased box of rice with sesame and tamagoyaki, not especially personal, but warm and filling. And yet when you open it, you find a small note scribbled on the inside of the lid. Smile, you're still here. You look around, but there's no vendor in sight. Maybe they leave these in every box. Maybe not. But it works. You do smile. And you are still here. Because love in Edo wasn't loud. It didn't need violins or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it just needed rice. And a little plum in the right corner. The afternoon light has shifted again, casting gold against the tiled rooftops and turning every shadow a little longer, a little softer. You find yourself climbing a gentle hill toward a neighborhood known for its scholars and retired samurai. The streets are tidy, the trees well tended. Here lunch isn't just a meal, it's a ritual, and one that dances with the rhythm of nature itself. Because in Edo bento didn't just change from house to house, it changed with the seasons. You pause at a park gate and watch a pair of elderly men unwrap their lunches on a stone bench beneath a ginkgo tree. Their boxes are different in color and shape, but the contents are almost identical. A wedge of grilled squash, a few crimson maple leaf carrots, and a small heap of chestnut rice pressed into an oval. This is autumn in bento form. Seasonal ingredients were more than just availability, they were philosophy. Edo cuisine followed the calendar like a prayer. Spring was fresh greens and pickled buds. Summer brought cooling noodles, salted cucumbers, and steamed sweet fish. Autumn meant root vegetables and simmered things. Winter preserved food's warmth and heavier textures,
to carry you through the cold. Historians still debate whether this devotion to seasonality was born from necessity or aesthetics. Likely both. Ito's markets lived and breathed by the cycle of the earth. Bento mirrored that. To eat out of season was frowned upon. To serve pickled cherry blossoms in winter, a faux pas. To omit chestnut rice in fall, practically criminal. You take a seat nearby and open your own box, this one packed by an innkeeper earlier in the morning. As you peel back the cloth, you find a delicate square of steamed kabocha, a mound of rice topped with black sesame, and at the center a perfect red-orange slice of persimmon. Sweet, silky, unmistakably October. There's a quiet poetry in the way these boxes mark time. Like tiny edible calendars, children would grow up remembering which month came with lotus root and which meant grilled eel. Courting couples would time their proposals to coincide with the yuam blossoms in early spring, their bentos echoing the moment with pink pickles and baby greens. Even the containers changed. In summer, thinner woods and breathable wraps helped food stay fresh. In winter, boxes were sometimes wrapped in wool and set near the hearth until departure. Bento wasn't separate from the world, it adapted to it like clothing or music. You once heard of a woman who packed her father's lunch every day for 20 years. She never asked what he wanted. She just watched the garden, felt the wind, and chose accordingly. One winter she packed only rice miso-soaked daikon and a single slice of pickled burdock. It's a tired season, she told him. We don't need more than that. There's a merchant across the path now, fanning himself slowly with one hand while eating with the other. His bento features barley rice, cool, nutty, and a heap of vinegared cucumber tossed with sesame oil. It's simple, refreshing, a summer lunch clinging to autumn. Not every seasonal bento was so gentle, though. Some were declarations. A full spread of cherry blossom pickles, fresh bamboo, and delicate egg threads might scream, spring is here, and I am thriving. A winter box packed with 7 kinds of preserved roots might say, I'm surviving better than you are. Food was weather, food was mood, and then there was the 4-box cycle. Among wealthier households and particularly poetic souls, some followed the tradition of rotating through 4 bento styles a year, not just ingredients, but entire box designs. Spring's box might be cherry wood carved with petals, summer's light cedar tied with blue silk, autumn lacquered in deep red, winter wrapped in indigo cloth, heavy and spare. Each box had its own scent, its own story, and over time its own set of memories. One man you met as a child swore he could remember every lunch his mother packed just by touching the box. It came in. There was also the seasonal etiquette of bento gifting. To bring someone a lunch in early summer might be seen as flirty. In winter, that meant care. If someone gave you a plum rice ball in January, that was love, or at least strong affection. And if someone refused your seasonal bento, oof, social catastrophe, like turning down a haiku. You think of all the little things these boxes held season after season, bite after bite. Weather forecast, mood ring, love letter, time capsule. You eat the persimmon slowly. Its sweetness, mellow, almost buttery. It tastes like the end of something, the beginning of something else. A child runs past you holding a wooden box tied in a checkered cloth. Her mother shouts after her, "Don't drop the egg again." Laughter follows. The bento is safe. You sit a little longer under the ginkgo tree. One leaf drifts down beside you, golden perfect. The box in your lap now empty except for the sticky sheen of chestnut on the edge of the rice. Season by season, slice by slice, you begin to understand the full shape of time in Edo, not just clocks or festivals, but in the flavors that arrive, stay, and then quietly leave again. You make your way down the hill, feet brushing aside the dry leaves, gathering at the edges of stone paths. The air has shifted, a little cooler, a little quieter. And as twilight begins to flirt with the edges of the sky, you find yourself near the back wall of a sack shop, one you've passed before but never entered. Today the smell of warm rice wine curls toward you, soft and almost floral, and it reminds you of something easy to forget. In Edo, even a lunchbox, humble wooden, carefully tied, could come with a little sip on the side. You round the corner and see a man seated on a wooden crate. His bento lies open on his knee, rice grilled fish, some simmered greens, and beside it, balanced on the lid, a tiny ceramic gourd. It's closed with a cork wrapped in twine. You already know what's inside. Just a sip. Historians still argue whether midday drinking in Edo was frowned upon or simply quietly understood. Officially, sake was not part of lunch. Unofficially, well, there's plenty of evidence. Diaries, sketches, even bento sets with built-in flask compartments that suggests otherwise. It wasn't about getting drunk. No one was trying to stumble back to the print shop or fall asleep in the merchant guild meeting. It was about warmth, softness, a pause, a little bit of courage or comfort nestled into a midday meal, like a secret kept between you and the clay. You watch as the man uncorks the gourd, pours just enough to cover the bottom of a wooden cup, and raises it without a word, to whom you're not sure. Himself, perhaps. His ancestors. Maybe to the fish. He drinks. A slow swallow. Then picks up his chopsticks and resumes his meal as if nothing extraordinary just happened. But it did. A ritual folded into a routine. Sake at lunch was most common among craftsmen, poets, aging laborers. People whose hands worked better with a little warmth in the joints. One famous calligrapher claimed he never penned a good stroke without 3 drops of rice wine whispering in my wrist. Whether that's true or just poetic marketing, you'll never know. Some bento sets came with tiny compartments for sake cups. You've seen them half the size of a thimble, lacquered or carved, designed to nestle into the corner of a lunch tier. Enough for a taste. Not enough to forget your name. Among friends, it was customary to share. One sip passed across hands. No refills, no bottle. Just a taste. You remember a record from a stonemason's journal describing the practice, a sip before the second rice ball. A smile? A reminder that we're still alive. There were rules, of course. Too much sake and you risked being labeled careless, disloyal, even dishonorable. But a single sip. That was culture. And in some circles, courtesy. A widow you once met told you her husband always left the last sip in his gourd, untouched. For the road back, he said. She never drank it herself. Just left the cork loose and watched the scent fade slowly through the afternoon. You walk into the sake shop now, greeted by rows of gourd flasks and paper-wrapped bottles. The vendor, a man with ink-stained sleeves and a crooked smile, offers you a tasting cup. Cold, he asks. You shake your head. Warm, please. Always warm. He pours from a ceramic bottle heated in a water bath. You take it in your hands and feel the temperature before the taste. It's soft, earthy, slightly sweet with the ghost of rice still clinging to its edges. You imagine it in a lunchbox, tucked beside pickled vegetables, a folded letter, a rice ball pressed with care. Not indulgent,
Not flashy, just human. And sake wasn't always liquid. Some workers packed sake lees, sake kasu, the creamy fermented paste left behind from brewing. It could be eaten straight or stirred into soup or smeared onto fish to cure it. One sailor once described it as rice wine without the danger. Others just said it made the world feel a little softer around the corners. You sip again. The warmth spreads through your chest like a polite fire. Outside, someone's bamboo flute echoes from an upper window, the notes curling like steam into the sky. And just like that, you understand. A sip of sake at lunch wasn't about escape. It was about presence, about grounding, about that delicate line between hunger and gratitude, between silence and song. You set down your cup, bow slightly to the vendor, and step back out into the fading day. Your bento is long gone, but something lingers. A little heat in your belly. A little calm in your breath. Not drunk, not full, just content. The sky is now the color of old paper, pale blue smudged with gray, and the sounds of Edo begin to shift. Shopkeepers close shutters with a practiced clatter. Dogs bark once then disappear into alleys. And you find yourself near the outer gate of a small moss-covered temple. Here the air is cooler, the noise distant, like it's been filtered through cloth. You slip off your sandals and step quietly across the stone path, past weathered statues and a bell that hasn't rung since last month. Inside the temple, monks are finishing their midday chores, and soon they will eat, but not with chatter, not with chopsticks clicking or laughter over miso soup. Here lunch is part of the practice, part of the discipline. You're about to witness one of the quietest, most deliberate meals in Edo, the monastic bento. A young monk, barefoot serene sleeves, rolled high gestures for you to sit. He doesn't ask if you're hungry. He knows you are. You kneel beside him on the tatami and he slides a low tray toward you. There's no ornate box, no lacquer or flourish. Just plain wood. Inside rice-pickled radish-boiled greens. A soup so clear you can see the bottom of the bowl. This is Shojin Ryori, the cuisine of devotion. No meat, no garlic, no strong flavors. Nothing that clouds the body or mind. Just balance. Humility, stillness served warm. You bow before the tray. The monk does too. And then for one entire minute, no one moves. Historians still argue whether this minute of silence, this moment before the first bite, originated with Zen tradition or older mountain ascetic rituals. But the essence remains: food is not taken, it is received. You pick up the chopsticks. They are smooth, unadorned, slightly heavier than expected. You take your first bite of rice. It's plain, but not dull. Subtle sweetness, steam rising like incense.
You chew slowly, not out of politeness, but because something in the room asks you to. Every ingredient here is passed through hands that touched it with reverence. The greens were picked at dawn, the broth brewed from kelp soaked since yesterday. Even the rice was rinsed 7 times until the water ran clear, not for flavor, but to honor the effort that grew it. No one speaks. The meal continues one bite at a time, punctuated only by the soft breathing of those around you. There's an open debate among scholars whether bento in temples influenced everyday Edo cooking or if it remained strictly cloistered. But certain techniques, like steam-only preparations, the careful layering of textures, and the symbolic arrangement of 5 colors, did trickle into the world beyond the gates. You spot the 5-color rule in your tray now: white rice, green vegetables, red, plum, yellow, pickled daikon, and black sesame. Not a rainbow, a rhythm. Monks believed each color nourished a different organ, a different emotion. To eat all 5 was to harmonize body and spirit. Bento here wasn't art, it was alignment. You sip the soup. It tastes like rain, earthy, gentle. The monk beside you finishes first. He bows again to the tray, to the food, perhaps to the silence itself, and begins wiping each container with a cloth. There's no waste here. Not even a grain of rice is left behind. What remains, if anything, is eaten with water. A small act of closing the meal's circle. You follow suit, carefully scraping every bit of rice with your chopsticks. You feel strangely not full, but whole. Like something more than hunger has been satisfied. Monks in Edo packed bento too when they traveled to other temples, visited the sick, or walked the city streets offering blessings. Their boxes were simpler than most, often made from untreated wood. Their meals were lighter, but they carried an unmistakable scent. 1 part sandalwood, 1 part boiled barley, 1 part stillness. You once heard of a monk who packed a single box every day for a dying friend, always including the same thing: rice and a slice of pickled plum. On the last day, he added a 2nd plum. For the journey, he said. No explanation, none needed. As you set your tray aside, the sky has darkened a little more. A bell rings, soft, low, distant. The monk nods, then disappears behind a sliding screen, his robes barely rustling. You step outside. The moss glows faintly under the twilight. The stones are cool underfoot. And in your belly, nothing stirs, not heaviness, not emptiness. Just quiet, just balance. The evening breeze follows you out of the temple grounds, gentle and just a little damp, like it carries secrets from the past. You turn down a narrow road, lined with shuttered stalls and closed paper shops. It's quieter now, the city easing into its nighttime rhythm. But as you walk, a strange tension rises, not from the silence, but from the memory of noise. Because the bento, even in all its peaceful ritual, wasn't immune to panic or plague. You arrive in a neighborhood marked by soot-stained stone and crooked roofs, the kind of place that doesn't get painted on fans or etched into wood blocks. Here the past clings like smoke. You notice the faint scent of vinegar in the air, the kind used for more than just flavor. It's a clue. This was once a quarantine zone. You step under a sagging archway and find yourself near an old well. A woman sits beside it, basket in her lap, wiping small wooden lids with a cloth soaked in ash water. You nod. She doesn't speak, but her hands move with the muscle memory of generations. Because in times of disease, when Edo was struck by wave after wave of measles, cholera, and smallpox, the humble bento had to adapt. It became sealed, strategic, sometimes even sacred. Historians still debate how widespread bento hygiene rituals were during epidemics, but written accounts and temple scrolls describe a clear shift. Cloths were boiled, boxes aired in smoke, pickles packed not just for flavor, but for their supposed cleansing properties. Umeboshi, already revered, became almost mythic kills, what the eye cannot see, one poem warned. Some families stopped sharing food entirely. Bento became an island, your rice, your box, your responsibility. Children were taught not to swap pickles. Laborers ate apart. Tea was poured from a distance. The bento, once a symbol of connection, became a kind of mask. You pass a small shrine where incense still burns. The offerings are simple: an old rice ball, a sliver of salted radish, a tiny folded fan. You've seen this before. It's a prayer for protection, not from hunger, but from the invisible. You remember reading about one spring when the city's schools were closed for weeks. Parents packed bentos anyway, setting them outside each morning like offerings. When the fever passed, children returned. Their boxes waited. The woman at the well glances at you, then holds up a lid. On the underside, carved in careful strokes, eat with clean hands, live with clear heart. You bow. She nods once and goes back to work. Some bento innovations born in plague years stuck around. Sealed containers with sliding panels, boxes lined with antibacterial washi paper, separate compartments for raw and cooked food. Even the rise of vinegar-seasoned rice, common in sushi and bento alike, was likely encouraged by the need to keep rice safe longer. There's a certain type of box from this period called kakurebako, hidden boxes. They opened from the bottom or side and were used to conceal meals, often for people too ashamed to eat in front of others or too sick to join the communal meal. You once saw one in a museum. It looked like a drawer, but inside rice still preserved after decades, hardened like porcelain. Not all responses to plague were quiet. There are stories, half truth, half theater, of bento being used to test for illness. A worker would eat their rice. If it tasted wrong, they were sent home. One poet even wrote, "He bit the plum but found no sour. They closed the shop within the hour. You reach a long bench and sit. The night is thicker now, no stars yet, but the lanterns along the canal begin to glow their light, bobbing on the water like fireflies on duty. You pull out your final bento of the day, this one packed by a caretaker you met earlier. It's wrapped in plain linen, and inside miso rice, preserved ginger, and 3 tiny radish slices cut into crescents. There's no note, just a faint scent of smoke and citrus. You eat slowly. The rice is soft but firm, the miso rich, without being heavy. The ginger burns your tongue just a little, cleansing like a silent blessing. The radish crunches, a reminder that something crisp and living made it through. You close the box, wipe your fingers, and breathe. Pandemics change things. They always do. They rearranged truss-touch tradition, but the bento survived. It adapted. It sealed itself shut when the world went dangerous, then opened again when it was time. And maybe that's the deepest lesson wrapped in all that wood and rice and cloth. Resilience isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, carefully tied, pickled, packed with love and a little vinegar. The moon has now risen above Edo's tiled rooftops, casting long silver shadows down the narrow streets. You follow the glow of lanterns past a row of shuttered shops and pause at a quiet plaza where the stones are warm from the day, and the air carries that familiar scent, rice, soy, and a hint of wood smoke. All around, people are finishing their last tasks, sweeping thresholds, folding laundry, yawning beneath open windows. And still, even now, bento is being prepared. Because bento wasn't just a daytime tradition, it was the fuel of a city in motion. And in the intricate gears of Edo's expanding population, over 1 million people, by the mid-18th century, those little wooden boxes did something few things could. They kept the machine running. You stop near a busy intersection where 2 vendors are packing up for the night. One of them lifts a lid from a long wooden crate, and you see what's inside dozens of bento neatly arranged, each with a label written in swift, brush-stroked kana. Deliveries for couriers, for night guards,
For long-distance boatmen who have yet to dock. These are working bentos, city bentos. Unromantic perhaps, but deeply important. In a society without convenience, stores microwaves or grab-and-go sushi rolls, the portable lunch became the great equalizer. The humble bento kept scribes scribbling, kept craftsmen carving, and kept Edo's endless river of commerce flowing. Historians still argue whether Edo's food distribution system was ahead of its time, or simply a brilliant adaptation to necessity. Either way, it worked. And it worked because of bento. You think of the vendors who woke before sunrise to start the rice, the women who steamed vegetables while babies slept beside them, the boys who strapped wooden boxes to their backs and delivered them rain or shine across neighborhoods and districts. A misplaced bento could delay an order, miss a delivery, or throw off an entire work shift. It's said that bento sales spiked during times of construction and festival, the building of a new bridge. Hundreds of mouths to feed, a kabuki theater performance. You could buy a box with rice pickles and fried tofu at the gate. Merchants adapted quickly. Some even carved brand names into their boxes. Not for style, for inventory. Bento that didn't get returned meant someone owed you a coin or a favor. And then there were the train station boxes, ekiben. These came later toward the end of the Edo period as rail lines began forming. But the idea was seeded long before selling portable meals to travelers and workers on the move. Some stations became famous for their particular bento, one known for its grilled trout, another for its mountain vegetables. Reputation, rice, and rails all bound in twine. But city bento wasn't just practical. It was clever, designed for portability, compactness, and function. Many had built-in handles. Others folded flat when empty. Some could be stacked like nesting dolls to save space. And every person had their preference. Some liked the square boxes, some preferred ovals. One artist refused to eat from anything but a 6-sided tray. Rice tastes rounder, he claimed.
You pass a group of night watchmen on patrol, their lanterns swinging in rhythm with their steps. One carries a box, tucked under his arm, simple pine tied with a blue ribbon. You nod as he walks by. He nods back. No words exchanged, but there's a shared knowledge. He won't make it to morning without what's inside. You remember reading about dock workers who ate while standing, bentos balanced on one palm, chopsticks in the other. Or craftsmen who ate with their backs to the wall tools nearby lunch, placed on a flat board beside them. Or the bathhouse attendant who snuck bites between shifts, carefully repacking each item to make it look untouched. The bento made it all possible, kept the city moving without stopping for meals. Like a quiet engine, inside every bag, every satchel, every coat sleeve. Even the officials had theirs. Government clerks working in long rows with inkwells and scrolls might pause only long enough to lift a lid, chew, sip tea, and get back to work. Bento wasn't lunch break, it was lunch with work. And in many ways, it's what let Edo's economy flourish while still preserving its rhythms of slowness, ceremony, and care. You sit on a stone step back against a wall and pull out what might be your last bento of the day. This one's from a vendor who handed it to you with a wink and said, "For walking." It makes sense now. It opens flat like a book. Rice on one side, pickled ginger, and sesame tofu on the other. Balanced, compact. Nothing rolls or spills. You take a bite. It tastes like purpose. A shopkeeper nearby sweeps the last of the day's dust into a pan. A mother walks past with a sleeping child strapped to her back. A dog yawns beside a fire bucket, and Edo hums on. One box at a time, one bite at a time. A city of 1 million people fed by hands. You'll never see stories. You'll never hear. Except perhaps in the weight of the rice, the bend of the box, and the flavor of something made by someone who simply wanted you to make it through the day. The moon is high now, casting a milky sheen across the rooftops and turning the worn stones of Edo's streets into quiet rivers of light. Your feet are tired, your steps slower, but your mind is full like a bento that somehow keeps making room for just one more bite, one more flavor, one more memory. And so before this day closes, you come to the final turn in your journey, a soft residential slope with homes nestled under deep eaves, smoke curling lazily from hearths within, a place where nothing feels extraordinary, and yet somehow everything matters. Because even now, centuries later, we still romanticize the Edo bento. Maybe it's the artistry, the way a mother shaped rice like blossoms or folded eggs into golden scrolls. Maybe it's the care, how each meal felt like a love letter folded shut with cloth. Or maybe it's just that feeling, the quiet gravity of opening a box and finding something made just for you. You stop near a low wooden bench, the kind someone might rest on before heading home, and sit for a moment. Your final box is empty, cleaned, and wrapped neatly in a furoshiki patterned with cranes. You run your fingers over the cloth, thinking about all the hands that have done this before. Folded corners, tied knots, packed care into compartments. It's easy to forget how much meaning can be cradled in the ordinary. A lunchbox, after all, isn't a grand gesture. It's not a feast. It's not poetry etched in stone, but in Edo, it became something more. A bento could reflect the seasons, express love, pass judgment, offer comfort, whisper apology, carry memory, carry longing. Historians still argue whether this is nostalgia or truth, whether we've romanticized the bento beyond its humble origins. But as you close your eyes, you know better. The truth isn't just in the facts. It's in the flavor, in the rituals, in the way we still crave care even now. Think about it. In a world moving faster than ever, we still reach for packed lunches with neat compartments. We still carve vegetables into shapes for our kids. We still fold notes into sandwich bags. We still pause just for a second before we eat like we're bowing to something. You look up. A shutter creaks nearby. A woman steps out onto her porch, her silhouette outlined by lantern light. She's holding a box. She sets it by the door, maybe for a husband, maybe a neighbor, maybe no one, but it's there, waiting. You rise and begin the final steps of the journey, back down the slope, past the shuttered stalls, past the vendors asleep beside their carts, past a cat curled under a bench dreaming of fish and rice. And as you walk, you feel lighter, not from an empty stomach, but from a full day. A day when you didn't just learn about lunchboxes. You stepped inside them, tasted their quiet truths, listened to what they held and what they gave. Now the streets grow still. The lanterns flicker. The bento boxes rest empty or waiting. And you drift into the night with the taste of rice and memory still lingering on your tongue. Now let's close the lid on today's story. Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders relax. Let the soft glow of Edo fade behind your eyes. The streets are quiet now and the boxes are packed away. The hands that cooked are folded in rest. The rice has been eaten, the cloths untied, and the small silent messages of care have done their work. Maybe you're thinking of someone now, someone who once made you a meal, or someone you packed lunch for. Let that feeling stay with you for a moment. Let it rise like steam from a warm bowl. The world can be loud, hungry, unpredictable, but inside a bento, things make sense. Each piece has its place. Each bite brings you back to yourself. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, let the weight of the day slide off your shoulders, like the knot of a furoshiki coming undone. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts soften. You are held. You are full. You are home. Sleep well, friend.